John, I think I see some of my family's Hanukkah gifts on that boat. Now we know where they are.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We don't seem to be able to solve these problems. And we don't want to
Yeah,
rock the boat, though. We don't want to rock the boat. So let's just keep smiling and pretend it's not happening.
right. Now, see, I think most regular viewers of Crowdsource the Truth know that I have all these different co hosts. Obviously, you are one of the longest standing collaborators. Everybody knows on Fridays we've got our sponsor exclusive show on subscribestar.com/I am John Cullen, patreon.com/I am John Cullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. But what less people may know, or fewer people may know, is that each guest has their own style and how the shows are prepared. And one of the things that I really enjoy about your approach, John, is that you are sort of like one of these like internet spider type crawlers who are going out and finding everything all week, compiling your report, and then you tell me very little about what we're going to discuss. So I don't even know what you are referring to with regard to rocking the boat. I was just making a supply chain joke about the inability to order Miranda Devine's book, The Laptop from Hell, and various other products that people are trying to get in time for Christmas. Hanukkah ship has already sailed, pardon the boat pun. But what are we going to be talking about tonight, John?
Well, actually, I think it's something that Peppermint Patty said. We didn't want to rock the boat when Biden spoke to Xi on the phone,
Ah,
and they had their call. And I think it was Peter Ducey, typical, that said, "Did President Biden talk to Xi about the origins of
origin.
COVID?" And I think Pisaki's response was, "Well, we didn't really want to rock the boat given the relationship." Now, when we look at how many people have died globally, if you're not willing to rock the boat over this, there's 5 to 6 million people dead.
Yeah.
And the talk is that it may or may not have started in Wuhan, whether it came from a cave or whether it came from a wet market or whether it came from a laboratory. Nobody seems to know. But the fact that they didn't want to rock the boat just seems a bit weird. It seems like a strange response.
I have a serious
You don't,
question.
yes.
Because we've all been watching these kind of interactions between Jen Psaki and Peter Ducey. Is this just me? Or do you feel like Jen Psaki is like secretly in love with him? He's like the guy behind her in class who's constantly spitting spitballs at her and she's so angry, but she kind of, there's a sexual tension there.
Well, I don't know if it's sexual, but there's definitely a tension there. And I
Yeah.
think she thinks she's one upping him. She thinks that he's, asking the zingers and that her answers are better than his questions.
I think she's wrong.
And well, that's what happens when you're a sociopath. You think you're smarter than everybody else, whether or not that's actually the case. So she's enjoying her responses and thinks she's winning. And I think that's what you're saying. So yes, I think there's a certain, but yeah, I see a lot of that face a lot.
Yeah, I mean, but
What do
why
they
does she
call
even
that?
still call on him? Couldn't she just be obnoxious and ignore him all the time?
Well, they were doing that for a while, and eventually it got to the point where I think, somebody, maybe it was Rupert Murdoch, said something. I don't know, but
Hmm.
it's almost like they have to call on him.
Hmm.
There's ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, and then what?
I don't know.
MSNBC, PBS. Come on,
Telemundo.
yeah. All right, so Biden didn't want to rock the boat with she, right? And I just, I think the thumbnail was exciting. Now that's a cargo ship up on a reef, right? And
But
there's an interesting metaphor here, which is at what point do you realize all hell has broken loose,
Mm.
and it's time to abandon ship. Now, at what point do you realize that your ship is about to go up on the reef?
Did you
Now,
notice
yeah,
the name of this ship?
it's the Fauci. Il,
Exactly.
Il Fauci.
It's on
Gotta
the
hand it to
rocks.
the art department because it was not the Fauci when I first saw it. So that is remarkable.
Yeah.
God bless the art department. So just imagine, yeah, it looks like that's where all the Christmas presents are. So if you guys are missing a shipment, something's backlogged at Amazon, I'm guessing. And we should talk about this a little bit. I mean, the ships are registered in Monrovia, but a lot of this is product from China destined to the United States. And one of the things we've talked about in the past is who are the biggest beneficiaries of unskilled labor coming across the border. In other words, people coming across the border aren't going to get radiology jobs at, Cornell Medical, right? I mean,
Well,
you don't
some
just,
might.
well, I don't really think you're swimming across with a coyote
To
guide
get your
and then
radiology job.
I'll be over at the radiology clinic tomorrow. I think
Maybe
they're
they could,
more farm jobs
well,
or
or
they're
packing
warehouse
boxes.
jobs,
Yeah.
farm jobs. And so you have to ask yourself for a minute, who's the biggest beneficiary of cheap labor? Who's the biggest beneficiary of unskilled labor? Farm owners. So the largest farm owner in the country, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
The guy who's selling the most is Amazon, is Jeff Bezos, and the Walton family, Walmart.
Mm.
How much of the stuff in Walmart? I mean, come on, what do they sell? Shirts $5 in Walmart? Where do you think that's being made? In Cincinnati? No, that's not being made in Missouri.
Mm.
So the biggest sellers of Chinese goods have to be Walmart and Amazon. Has to be.
Now, wait a minute. Look at this. Have you seen this Walmart pledge? Walmart China firmly believes in local sourcing with over 95%. So wait a minute. If you're in China shopping at Walmart, the stuff is made in China? Is that the idea?
Well, of course. What do you think? You go to Walmart in China and everything's made in America?
That would be
You know how
funny.
much you know what that would cost?
Well, Joe Biden would specify that if he was made
Yeah.
CEO of Walmart, because
But
anything
seriously though,
doesn't make sense.
but when you go to a Walmart, isn't everything there for the most part made in China?
The thing that disappoints me most about Walmart is that I have shopped at Walmart, particularly when I was like on location and productions in places where that was kind of like the only place to shop. I was unable to find, in some cases, products that did not have artificial preservatives and sweeteners and hydrogenated oils and all kinds of processed ingredients that, for me, I was only there for a couple of weeks or months eating that stuff, but people who live there always are just kind of like filling their bodies with this toxic crap from Walmart.
I'll give you another example. I believe that if you go to Walmart and you want to buy like bacon or you want to buy a rack of ribs, I believe their exclusive supplier is Smithfield or Smithyfield.
Oh, isn't that bought by China?
That's Chinese owned. So if you're shopping in a Walmart, you can't not buy
Chinese
food
stuff.
product, right? Chinese food products. So in other words, if you're buying meat and it's coming from a Smithfield processing plant, you're buying your food from a Chinese company. And again, this is the sort of thing, we don't want to rock the boat. So, maybe we shouldn't really talk about it and let's just pretend that's not really happening.
Yeah, I mean, what did Joe Biden talk to Xi about on his Zoom call? I mean, it seems like Joe Biden is the guy who says that he feels that politics is all about a personal relationship. And I think that if you have a 747 that will fly you wherever you want, having a Zoom call with somebody is a little bit of a cop-out. Why didn't you go there and shake his hand and meet him personally?
I don't think he was invited. And
no, I think the problem has got to do with incontinence.
Well, that's another story. It is a long flight and it is a pain in the neck. But why don't we go to the deck and let's show our YouTube audience some of the stuff we're going to get into when we go to the Patreon only stuff. Definitely we don't want to rock the boat, right? Here on YouTube. We're not
Right.
doctors. We're not giving advice. There's definitely, you don't come here for advice, right? So like Dana White goes to Joe Rogan for advice.
I like that.
Don't come here for any advice, okay? Call Dana and ask Dana what to do. All right, but what we want to do, let's go to the next slide. So this is what I was talking about as far as Joe Biden doesn't want to rock the boat, right? He doesn't want to face the music. That one on the upper right's that's a mess. That's a 7-star ship moving other boats across the ocean. So
Oh,
talk
wow.
about rocking a boat full of boats. That's a
Wow.
moving boat. Yeah, it moves other boats across the ocean.
There are some really interesting boats that they've made. That
Yeah,
one that the original image came from, it was the worst maritime disaster in New Zealand history.
I don't doubt it. It's a mess.
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. All right, let's go to our next slide. So, what I wanted everybody, again, asked if he'll press China on the COVID origin. Biden just walks away, doesn't take the question,
Yeah.
and they don't want to rock the boat. All right, so what am I going to say? All right, so if he's not going to rock the boat, I'm not going to rock the boat. But the data that we share here and the charts that I share, if you go to the next slide, these data and charts come from the CDC. This is the Wonder system. And this is where the CDC logs its mortality data.
I was
And this is
wondering
sort of,
about that.
yeah, this is the master mortality system. And it is a beast. And you can query it. It's just a real pain in the neck. Now, this is Wonder with VAERS. And so you can query the VAERS database with Wonder. And so I was
Oh,
looking
wow.
I was looking, Senator Johnson was testifying and talking about VAERS deaths from influenza vaccines. And I wanted to pull that up. So this is the tool. So when people see the charts and all the stuff that I publish, this is how you got to get it. Take some
John,
work.
would you say it is fair to, like when I hear about VAERS outside
Mhm.
of our show or people that we're talking to, it almost seems like they discount it as an alternative, like an alt-right database but here it is on the CDC. Like they say, oh, well, that's not verified and whatever. But the CDC is using it as a resource and allowing you to query it. Obviously, it's got to be important information on there.
Well, you and I have talked a lot about the miscarriages in VAERS
Yeah.
and how what sort of state you've got to be in as a pregnant person having lost their pregnancy,
Birthing person.
birthing person having lost the baby after having had this
That's right.
vaccination, and then having the time and inclination and energy and what have you to go into this damn system and log that and record it. And so many people have said that that's why it's underreporting the number of cases. But what the CDC comes back with is yes, but we also don't have the ability to confirm any of this stuff. So it's
So
just
why don't
sort of,
they make a better system? I mean, it seems like the adverse events related to particularly an emergency use, inadequately tested thing would be an important data point that you'd want to track very, very carefully. The other thing that occurs to me while you're speaking is that if under any circumstance a woman lost a pregnancy and might even have the inkling that some choice that she made played a role, I think a lot of women would have maybe an impossible time recovering from that psychologically.
again, I've been hounding this miscarriage number, which is now more than 3,000. And again, the CDC will say, well, those aren't verified. We haven't been able to reach out to these people and confirm that in fact, and what have you. And so that has to be the asterisk as we talk about it here on YouTube. but theirs is their system. This is how you query it for real. And it's a beast. What am I supposed to tell you? I'm an Oracle guy, so it's not that intimidating to me, but it's terrible software. It's like even as a professional software guy, you look at it, you're like, oh, this is just horrible. Whatever they paid for this, it's just terrible. It's just a mess. So let's keep going. I want to get a bunch of stuff in front of the YouTube folks before we have to go to Patreon only content. So here's some really interesting news. So we talked about this a little bit last week, and I just published a video at the Johnny Hoover channel on YouTube where I read this story, the double whammy COVID flu. It's becoming clear that co-infections happen all the time. All right. So this is the Atlantic magazine all of a sudden acting as if influenza and COVID go together like peanut butter and chocolate. And of course they do. They happen all the time, right? So I just made a video reading that story from the Atlantic, and it's a bedtime story, and they call it the double whammy COVID flu or something. Yeah, there it is. And I just published this a day or two ago, and it only has 2,400 views. So the videos on YouTube don't get that many views anymore.
Now, it's interesting, John. You talk a lot about Lorene Jobs and the Atlantic magazine that she publishes. Did you see somebody has just come out, been releasing a lot of photos from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and somebody was on Twitter earlier with this. It's Lorene Powell Jobs and Ghislaine Maxwell having a good old time in some fancy, I don't know, it looks like they just got out of the pool, but they seem quite happy to be hanging out together. And the thing that's weird is the Atlantic apparently published this thing about the great fake child sex trafficking epidemic. I don't know if it's a fake epidemic. I think there's a lot of kids that are kidnapped and certainly from foreign countries brought over the border and put into indentured servitude of some pretty terrible kinds.
I responded. Let's take a look at that tweet from the Atlantic from Caitlin Tiffany, this great fake child sex trafficking epidemic, because I responded to it, but my response will be buried and hidden under "this could be offensive," right? So I responded to that tweet.
Not a huge Twitter expert. How do I find that? Okay. Maybe if I go to you, it's easier.
Yeah, if you go to my Twitter, whatever it's called. That's what we're going to do, Patreon only. When we go Patreon only, I want to show the patrons what's been happening on Twitter. If you go to tweets and replies, click on tweets and replies, and you'll see that I reply to other people, right? And this is the thing for tonight. Here I replied about the Miranda Devine book, and they're talking about the laptop. And I did a video that's not on YouTube, that's only elsewhere. I did a post earlier about Dave Chappelle because I think he's very, very funny. But I responded to that tweet. By the way, here's something. Most people don't know what's happening in Russia. Can you zoom out?
Yeah.
There's an influenza outbreak in Russia. I tweeted this earlier today. Nobody seems to know this. Nobody seems to care. But that's H1N1.
Wow, huge numbers.
Yeah.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of interesting things on John's Twitter. People are going to want to follow. But, I'll keep searching for that. Why don't you carry on while we're looking for this tweet here?
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's go back over to our deck if you can. And we'll find it. Yeah, there you go. So the double whammy COVID flu thing, I do a bedtime story. I read that story. And this is where they tell everybody that the two are going hand in hand and that it's much more common than you think it is. Well, yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, there's an article. Did COVID-19 cause the flu strain to go extinct? Well, wait a second. Don't you remember a white paper from October 2020 that suggested that we had accidentally eradicated the flu. So now the Wall Street Journal is saying, did COVID cause the flu or a strain of the flu to go extinct? Well, let's go to the next slide.
Before
So
we
they were
do that,
asking,
John,
yeah,
this is the least scientific question since, did dinosaurs build Stonehenge?
well, it's a ridiculous question, right?
Of
And
course.
so it makes it, well, where do you guys come up with this crap, right? Well, go to the next slide.
I just have to
So
like that. It's hilarious.
it's okay. All right. So they're asking, did COVID cause the flu strain to go extinct? Well, in October of last year, 14 months ago, I published a paper called The Worldwide Eradication of Influenza: Decreased Influenza Activity During the COVID-19 Pandemic from Australia and Chile, South Africa, and the USA to the Worldwide Eradication of Influenza. I have the same qualifications as Bill Gates.
Did you not go to college?
I didn't graduate Harvard either. Exactly. I didn't graduate from Harvard. So he and I have the same qualifications. But in this white paper, for real, let's go to the next slide. I truly did document that the World Health Organization is saying, no, as of week 11 through 14, there effectively was no influenza anywhere in the world. If you zoom out a little bit, people will see this is not just a handful of countries. It was a number of countries. In fact, it was pretty much everywhere except for one or two or three countries. And so this phenomenon was sort of undeniable. This is WHO's data. This is the WHO Flu Mart reporting system. It says nothing. I'm just pulling it. Right. So this paper.
Why do they call it Flu Mart? It's like Walmart.
It's like where you can get all the different kinds of flus. So, you can get really good prices too.
Go shopping.
But again, you go back up a screen or two, and the Wall Street Journal yesterday is saying, did COVID cause the flu strain to go extinct? And 10 days ago, the Atlantic is talking about the flu and COVID. This is, to me, something like what you've talked about in the past, which is where we've been owning this little niche of the narrative, and that's starting to aggravate some powerful people. And they've decided that no, this is not going to be a crowdsource the truth narrative. This is not going to be, Jason and John are not going to control this aspect of the story. The Atlantic, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times are going to control this aspect of the story. We're going to tell the story the way we want to tell the story, and Caitlin is going to tell the story. Right? Caitlin. So Caitlin's going to tell the story. Well, no. Whoever it was that was the author of that story, and Roxanne Comsey on the double whammy COVID flu story. In other words, they're 27-year-old authors that work at the Atlantic, that work at the Washington Post, that will write what they're told to write.
Yeah, you're right. John, we're almost out of time before we need to make our transition over to Patreon and Subscribestar, but a lot of people are aware of this already, but we should touch on it for a moment. I believe this came down today. Julian Assange, it was ruled in the United Kingdom, can be extradited to the United States. I think that's a very bad development for him. And I mean, they've just been torturing this guy for maybe 10 years at this point.
Yeah, I follow his wife on Twitter, and it's a tragic situation. She was in the courtroom and tweeted that they're going to give a decision in 10 minutes. And it just was devastating. So yeah, Stella. So I follow her on Twitter, and she was tweeting right from the courtroom. So
is this her?
Yeah. So again, I think the question we all need to be asking is, if Julian Assange, an Australian, can be extradited to the United States, why can't I get extradited to Saudi Arabia for a beheading?
Oh, wow. I don't think the United States does that.
Whoa. What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's the same thing. So if we can get Julian Assange extradited he's never been to the United States.
And they're going to accuse him of espionage, which he's not even a U.S. citizen. So I think if you're helping another government against the United States and you're not from the United States, how is it espionage? It's just you don't like the United States.
If the new government after MBS takes over, decides to prosecute you and me for publishing what we've published about Maite bin Abdullah and Mohammed bin Nayef, and that constitutes blasphemy, and that our tongues need to be cut out, and then we need to be beheaded. And that's the punishment for what we did. But no, we're going to be extradited.
Nah.
It's the same thing. Why can they extradite Julian Assange and not anyone from the United States to a country? Like, in other words, why not China?
Sorry, I was confusing espionage with treason. I think they can charge anybody with espionage. That's just gathering defense information, transmitting defense information. I think it's only treason if you're a citizen of the country and then you do this. So this is still espionage is what they'll try to charge him with. And I do think that you can get the death penalty for that.
He's not even a U.S. citizen. So if that's the case, and again, the other question I keep asking is, what is it exactly that he exposed that they're willing to kill him? The helicopter gunship thing? Yeah, well, right. So the helicopter gunship video?
Real quick. It? Capital punishment is a legal penalty under the criminal justice system of the United States federal government. It can be imposed for treason, espionage, murder, large-scale drug trafficking, and attempted murder of a witness, juror, or court officer in certain cases. So, I mean, they could try to put him to death. We're out of time right now, John. We're going to get into more details on this and other topics when we continue on the sponsor-exclusive segment coming up in less than 5 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We'll see everybody over there in 3 minutes.